Hello, you're watching Calling All Stations, Layout Update 4. After my last update, I hit a bit of a slowdown really and didn't get much done for a couple of months through November and December through being busy with other things. But this January I've really cracked on with a few bits and pieces on the layout and we're really moving forward now. So let's see what I've been up to. Okay, one of the reasons why I was delaying development to the layout was I was agonising over which shunt signals to include and how best to control them via DCC. I figured there was no point carrying on with any other scenic developments until I got these signals in place, as I knew they were probably going to be a fiddly fit. So to start with, I've bought 3 shunt signals for the yard end of the layout. If I like them, then I can include the same method on the station end of the layout. So I've opted for these 3 Burco kit signals. They cost about, I think it was about £10 each, and they're being powered by 2 Traintech DCC signal controllers. I think the model number is SC1, and again they cost about 12 quid. I got them from Hatton's. And the reason I've only got 2 DCC controllers is one controller will power 2 signals, so I've got 3 signals and 2 controllers. These signals are being powered by some LED blocks which sit in the baseboard. This all comes with the kit, by the way, and then they face upwards and transfer light into these 3 very thin pieces of optic plastic, and then that transfers in itself to each of the lenses on each of the aspects. Now this works fine when the signal is in its on position, when it's red, and hopefully you can see the tiny little red lights and it looks quite good. It's not prototypical, and I'll get on to why it's not prototypical in a second, but when I turn the signal to its off position, like so, and hopefully you can see that one bottom right, I'll just adjust the focus on the camera, there we go. It looks like all 3 aspects are lit, and that's because the light from the LED block below the signal is bleeding through these 3 little optic pieces of plastic to make it look like all 3 of the lenses are lit. And hopefully you can see this on the camera like I can. When the signal's in its on position, like I said, the red LED, it's not bleeding through to the other aspects and it looks fine, but as soon as I switch the signal, or as soon as I include any of the white LEDs, it looks like all 3 are lit, and I can show you with the other signals, and some are worse than others. Now in actual fact, when the signal is in its on position, at the moment only the bottom left aspect is working. What we should be seeing in real life is the bottom 2 aspects working. Now in modern signals that you see now, both of those are lit red. However, at the time this layout exists in the 80s, you'd see one aspect red on the bottom left and the bottom right aspect would be white. Now the reason mine aren't doing that is twofold. Firstly, I broke one of the signals by putting too many volts through the bottom right LED and it blew up. And the other reason is as soon as you turn any of the white LEDs on, it looks like the whole signal is on regardless. So when I did have them working as it should be, it kind of obliterated the red LED, so even when the signal was on it looked like it was off, and it kind of outshone the red LED and you couldn't see it anyway, which was a bit of a pain. So I've opted to disconnect the remaining signals that had the white LED on the bottom right aspect that was working still. I opted to disconnect them so you could properly see that the signal is red. It's not 100% prototypical, and yes, that does sort of eat away at my OCD and it's a bit annoying, but for now I'm going to leave it like that, as it's kind of clear when it's off and when it's on. And it does annoy me a bit that it does look like all 3 aspects are lit when it's off. But anyway, they do look really good, these Burco signals. They look the part, they're just really fiddly to put together, and you may want to reconsider having seen how they work in real life. I mean, they're really good kits, they do look great, they do look like the real things, and some of the other options that I've seen out on the internet, they just don't look as good. They don't look the profile and the way they're put together, they just don't look as good as these. However, that light issue does bug me quite a lot. However, they work really well with the signal controller, and I can also include them in the routes, the point routes. So if I want to do a certain movement from yard to station, I can just press one button and it will set all the points, as you'll hear it's doing, and it will clear the signal as well. And then as soon as I want to choose a different route, I can just press one button. It will turn the signal to its on position, and then it will turn another signal to its off position. And you cannot fault the Traintech DCC, any of the DCC stuff. It's really good. I'm probably going to fill my whole layout with some of this DCC stuff. I've got the signals down the other end, as we saw in the last edition. I've got something else to show you, which is Traintech coming up. And they're quite affordable as well, only sort of 12-13 quid for these little signal controllers. They're really easy to set up, exactly the same as the signals. If you go back to last episode's video, you can see how they're set up. It's all done by push of one button, exactly the same method. So to sum up, I probably won't use these signals on the station end of the layout. I'm looking at some other options for that, maybe the absolute aspect signals, which are much more expensive, but the LEDs are fitted in the signal head itself, up in here, rather than a light shining up through the baseboard and kind of then bleeding through to each of the aspects, which is a pain. But there we go. The shunt signals are fitted. I think I'm going to keep them there. Maybe at some point in the future I'll replace them and try and fix that bottom right LED issue so that it works. I could of course use more powerful resistors, or bigger value resistors rather, to dim the white down, but at the time it was a real big faff to get them in anyway, so I've just left them like this. Anyway, let's move on to some of the other stuff. You can start to see that there's some scenery bubbling away here, so let's take a look at that. So after I got the shunt signals installed, I also added these yard lights. These are also from Berco, and I'm pleased to say I was much happier with the installation process for these. Maybe that's because they came out of the box looking like this and there was no fiddling around. Even the resistors are pre-wired, and all you've got to do is connect the two wires to your 12-volt line. I think they look fantastic. I bought the original two here at Worley to test them out, and then I've added this one recently, the third one here, and that's not working yet because I haven't wired that in. But if I turn down the house lights, I hope you'll agree they do look really good. They add a real nice dimension to the layout, and I think the lights are sort of the perfect luminosity. They're not too bright, they're not too dark, and once I get this third one in, I think it will really complete the look of the yard scene at night. It will certainly add a bit of glow to this sort of refueling point that I've got here. And on that note, I've actually glued in an LED and drilled a hole through the bottom of the refueling point, so there'll be another LED sort of lighting this point here. Again, that's got to be wired in, but I hope you agree, I think they look rather good. Once I had all my holes drilled and knew where I was putting all the lights, then I could start with some of the scenic development. So I've got all three lines ballasted, as you can see. The ballast comes from John Dutfield. I think it's their own variety of ballast, you know. You can get it in a variety of different sizes, and I think this is the finest size they do. It cost only £4.50, I think, and it comes in a very generous tub, sort of a Chinese or an Indian takeaway tub. So it's plenty to do the whole layout for only £4.50, and I think it beats any of the woodland scenic stuff that you can get. So if you're in the Essex or London area, definitely check out John Dutfield in Chelmsford for your ballast needs, or check out your own model shop. They'll probably have some kind of similar own brand ballast that you can use, and I think it's come out really well. The scatters and the grass colour, and which you can see going down the layout there, that's all woodland scenic stuff, and I have a pre-mixed pot of a couple of different greens, and then I've got a couple of different browns, and I'll mix the greens and browns together depending on what sort of area I'm covering. So you'll see down here it's a bit more muddy. There's still a kind of element of green, but then in the distance there, if I can zoom the camera in the distance there, it's a bit more green, it's a bit grassier, if that's even a word. And I've added in some kind of bigger clumps going down the end of the back wall there. Again, I'll add more as we go to develop the scene. The cable trunking you can see in the background and running through to the foreground here is from Wills. I think you can also get similar kits from Ten Commandments, which I've seen on various people's channels. I've added that in just to add a sense of realism, and these white tubes, which I will eventually paint the correct orange colour, sort of continues the cable trunking underneath the track. And then towards, if I move the camera down to this sort of little ground frame box. Now, probably in real life, these ground frame boxes would have all been mechanical, certainly in yards. But I've kind of added a bit of artistic license, and maybe those levers now control some kind of electric relays. But it's a nice little addition to have this little Bachmann ground frame box. Looks great, I think. The paving, by the way, that comes from Metcalfe. I'm very fond of the Metcalfe stuff, and certainly the Metcalfe paving. I've used it in all the layouts that I've done so far, and they basically come with little stickers and you just stick them down. I add a little bit of PVA glue to make sure they don't go anywhere, but you can just literally take them out of the packet and stick them on. And they give a nice bit of depth, because each piece you have to individually lay. It's quite painstaking, definitely if you're doing large pavement areas, but it does look the part and it does look great. Okay, so finally down the shed end of the layout, right at the end of the yard, a couple of things to mention. Firstly, this platform area, this maintenance platform, that's from Gauge Master. I've just sprayed that a kind of primer grey, and I think that looks quite good in that colour. I'll probably weather it up some more. And then I've added in these hard standing areas. These are actually just pieces of plasticard, black plasticard. I didn't know you could actually get black plasticard. I thought it was all white. I'll weather all this up and kind of take a bit of the shine off at a later date. So hopefully the camera's picking up some kind of flashing, and that's coming from inside the shed itself. And rather typically, as soon as I've said picking up some flashing, oh there we go, it's now started up. This is the Train Tech piece of kit that I was talking about earlier, and it's a welding effect circuit board with these two LEDs that comes with it. You can connect them up via DC or DCC. I've actually got mine connected up via DCC, so I can turn that off if I turn that effect off if I wanted. And the idea is, it looks like once you put a building over it, that there's some welding going on inside the workshop. So you get this very strong hot white light, and then the red one comes on as the welding cools off. So when I put the building back over it, hopefully you can kind of see it flickering away. Again, if I turn the house lights down, you should see the effect even more so. There we go, there it goes. And it looks even better when you've got a piece of rolling stock in there. It kind of, the light shines off the rolling stock and really gives a nice effect that some work's going on in the shed. So work hasn't completely stopped down the other end of the layout at the station end. I've still been cracking on with a few things, most notably this Metcalfe goods shed, which I'm kind of turning into a parcels office. I finally extended the parcels office siding, which comes out a bit further. Originally it stopped about there, and it was just for a pilot loco. I decided to extend it to add in this feature. Again, I really love the Metcalfe stuff. I love how simple it is to put together, and they create some really nice sturdy buildings. And this will form a really nice parcel depot. I've started by adding some NSE touches by painting the roofing red there. I need to do something about the door. The red and green doesn't quite work for me yet, but I think it looks great, and I think it's going to be a nice addition to the layout. And if we come round over here, I've added in my own signage, and hopefully the camera's picking that up. Woodford Wells Parcel Depot, Red Star and Royal Mail. Red Star was sort of BR's own parcel delivery service, but it's also going to take care of Royal Mail at that depot as well. And you can see I've got a Rail Express coach being loaded up there with parcels in the parcel shed. And running the length of the station area from the parcel depot down to the station. I've painted this black. This is going to form part of a roadway and a sort of a yard driveway. Again, there'll be weathering, there'll be lots more scenery than just sort of a black base. But it's a starting point, and it sort of concentrates where I'm going to go with that area. The other thing I've added down at the station end is this rather neat intercity billboard. Everything we do is driven for you. That's not a lyric from a 1980s song, but it is from the 1980s era. And if you look at Chinkford, which the station is modelled on, there is a billboard down the end, the terminating end of the platforms. So that is quite true to life. There's lots to do on the station end. Lighting. I've got some back scenes to pick up today, so they're going to go in soon. And then we can start get ballasting once I've decided which shunt signals to add at this end. The last thing I've been working on is this bridge area here. You'll remember from the last video I was toying with putting in a kind of tube station design with a track coming through here and a station building. I was never quite happy with the way it looks. It looked kind of half bridge, half tunnel. It looked a bit odd. So I scrapped that, and in its place I've built this kind of dual carriageway road. There's still a lot of work to do on it. Obviously I need to add central reservations, need to add some weathering and some kind of brickwork on the walls, but this only took me about an hour to do. Again, it's Metcalfe paving slabs on the sides. I've painted it black and added some white road markings. Took me about an hour, and I think it's going to look really good when it's finished. Those two wooden marker poles there will eventually fit this gantry across the top, and I'll build it a proper plasticard gantry. The sign itself, by the way, the fonts are true to life. I downloaded the fonts from cbrd.co.uk, and it's modelled on a road that runs close to my flat in North London, the North Circular. And Gates Corner, if you want to look it up, it is kind of a junction that was lost when the North Circular was upgraded in the 70s or the 80s, and losing the junction at South Woodford, which was up until then known as Gates Corner. So it's kind of a little in-joke that I'm putting it back and all the destinations are correct if it still existed today. So that's all I've got time for, I think. At Woodford Wells, I've got lots to be getting on with, lights to put in, backboards to include, scenery to get going on the station area, and again the shunt signals down this end. But I'm really pleased with how the yard end of the layout is developing, and lots to do really, so I better crack on. Thanks for joining me on Calling All Stations. See you soon.